Hi, and welcome back to our Bible study. We are going through the book of Revelation, and we are on to Revelation chapter 3 now. So Revelation chapter 2 went through a couple of churches, you remember that, and we are continuing on with that now with the rest of the churches that Jesus is sending letters to. So the next one we have is the dead church. So this was in the capital of Lydia, and the main worship here for the regular people, like not people in the church, was Roman Caesar. So this was like the worshiping of Roman Caesar. So Jesus says here that their works are well known, but that God sees them as dead. So it means that they were really well known in the community for all the things that they were doing. But at the same time, God was looking at them and he saw all their works as just dead. And he saw their church as dead. He also says here that he is going to come as a thief. This is the same thing that Jesus said in Matthew chapter 24 and chapter 25 when he said he was going to come as a thief in the night, which means people aren't going to be expecting his return when he comes. He also tells them to keep their garments clean. So this is obviously not just talking about having their clothes clean, but he wants them to stay pure and to not take on the filth of the culture that is around them. And then Jesus says that he will confess their names before God. So that is what happens to that church. The next one is the faithful church. This is the second church that Jesus has nothing bad to say about. And it is in Philadelphia. So we are now 40 miles southeast of our last church. And in here, we see that Jesus says he's going to keep the church safe during the tribulation and that he is going to return. So the faithful church is one that's faithful to God, and they're really known for loving other people. All right, the next one is the lukewarm church. This is the last church, and we've gone 45 miles southeast of Philadelphia, and we are 90 miles east of Ephesus. So we've made a complete circle back to almost at our first church. So this church was, this city where the church was, it was a really, really wealthy city. It had a lot of banks. It had medical school there. So a lot of people came there to go to medical school. But they didn't have a good water supply. So the church was really, really, really wealthy. But what they didn't see is that they were spiritually starving. So because they really had no physical needs, then they forgot that spiritually they had needs. So they didn't feel like they needed God. We can think about this in our lives, right? Sometimes when we're under a lot of pressure, when things are when we're having money problems or we're having other kinds of problems or we're in a crisis, that's when we remember that we need Jesus and we call out to him. So this church wasn't having any crises. There was nothing, there was no persecution attacking them. They were wealthy, they had everything that they needed. So they had forgotten to call out to God and that he was there for their spiritual needs and that they did actually need him. It also talks, this is where we get the verse in the Bible about how they're lukewarm, so their water, God wanted to spit them out of their mouth. So remember, the cold water would have been really refreshing. And because this is a medical town, they would have known the hot water would have been used for medical purposes. And then the lukewarm water was just useless. It wasn't good for anything, which is what Jesus was saying here. That you're not cold, you're not hot, you're just useless. You're just boring and dull, and you're pointless. You're a pointless church. All right, so this church was just indifferent. Now here there's another very famous verse in the Bible that comes here, and that is Jesus saying that I stand at the door and knock. If any man, stand at the door and knock, if you hear me and allow me to enter, I will come in and sup with you. So we need to think about this in a couple of different ways. Remember how we talked about these letters to the churches? They could be to these specific churches. They could be to churches, different types of churches or different types of Christians, or church history. So think about it that way. Let's look first as the individual. And Jesus is standing on the door and knocking, as in he wants to come in and be part of your life. And if you open the door, if you allow him to come in and be part of your life, he will come in and he will be with you, and he will sup with you, and he'll be part of your life. Also, as the church. Remember, this is a church that they didn't think they needed him. They had everything. So sometimes in our churches, and we can be going out, we can be doing all kinds of stuff, we just feel like we don't need it. And maybe God is knocking on the door of our church, and he wants to come in and be part of our church. But we're so busy just trying to make ourselves look really good and trying to have a nice, comfortable church that we forgot that Jesus wants to come in and be part of our church. And also we'll be talking about times of history. We get to a time period where just in general, in our culture that there's no real needs, and that we have forgotten that Jesus is there and he wants to come in. He wants to be part of us because we do need him. We're spiritually starving. So that is that verse that's very popular. There's pictures, there's artwork of Jesus standing on the door and knocking, and it can be looked up in all those ways. All right, so that is the end of Revelation chapter 3. So you can go back and you can read this now, and this is the rest of the churches. And remember to think about, first of all, you personally and where you fall into these different types of churches before you can think about your church, but you do need to think about the church you're attending also. And are you attending one of these churches? And then thirdly is our culture. So remember, like I said, we can't ask for a revival in our culture until we have a revival in our church. And you can't ask for a revival in your church until you have a revival in you. All right, the next video is going to be a bonus video where I'm going to go through each of these churches again, but looking at it from the point of view of church history. For now, go back and read chapter 3, and you have just listened to a Bible study, Revelation chapter 3.